2024, billionaire businessman Jared Isaacman made history as the first non-professional astronaut to walk in space. I remember sitting on my living room couch, totally amazed by the thought that an ordinary person like me could travel to space. But that excitement didn't last long, especially when I realized how much this ordinary trip cost. According to Business Insider, a 2-hour flight with Virgin Galactic costs around $450,000, and a week in space, over 55 million. All that money and for what? It's not like it's pushing science forward or exploring any new frontier. It's a pricey thrill ride for the ultra wealthy, offered at the cost of our environment and shared resources. So, let's dive deep into what's going on with space tourism, why it's a problem, and what we can do about it. First, what exactly is space tourism? It's basically commercialized space travel, so private people, rather than astronauts, can travel to space just for fun. Unlike missions designed to advance science or technology, space tourism is primarily for the thrill, experiencing zero gravity, seeing Earth from a distance, and venturing beyond the atmosphere. Companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic are competing to make space travel more accessible, repeatable, and safe. But right now, it's only an option for the ultra rich, leaving the rest of us to pay for the environmental consequences. Space tourism wasn't even possible until 2001, when Dennis Tito, a U.S. businessman, paid about $20 million to catch a ride on a Russian spacecraft. This set a precedent, and in the years that followed, a few other wealthy individuals also paid enormous amounts for a seat in space. It's only in the past decade that companies like Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin have turned space tourism into a serious industry, especially after Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos took their own flights in 2021. And while they may claim that these trips are paving the way for all of us to go to space one day, the reality is that space tourism is still a luxury that only a few of us can afford. One of the biggest problems with space tourism is space debris. Every time a rocket goes up, it leaves behind bits and pieces that stay in orbit. Broken satellites, random scraps of metal. According to NASA, there are over 36,000 pieces of this space junk circulating Earth, and every launch adds more. This matters because space debris increases the risk of collisions, which could impact future space missions. Take the International Space Station, for example. It's our most advanced space lab, yet between 1998 and 2022, it had to dodge debris at least 30 times to avoid collisions. Imagine the danger and financial loss if we lost access to GPS, weather forecasts, or global communication due to debris-related accidents. Scientists at MIT estimate that even small debris can hit with the force of a high-speed bullet, putting valuable equipment and human lives in danger. Space, which should be used for research, is turning into a junkyard because of unnecessary luxury trips. Space tourism is also damaging our atmosphere. Each rocket launch releases particles that harm the ozone layer, which protect us from the sun's harmful UV rays. According to a study from the University of Cambridge, rockets release black carbon particles into the stratosphere, where they can stay for years, accelerating climate change. Research shows that a black carbon is up to 500 times more efficient at warming the atmosphere compared to carbon dioxide. The University of Virginia found that just one launch can deplete almost all the local ozone along an 8-kilometer path. Think about that. While most of us work to reduce our carbon footprints, a few wealthy tourists are undoing years of effort. A 2022 study published in Nature Communications projects that if space tourism continues to grow, it could be responsible for a 10% reduction in the ozone layer by 2050. That would mean higher skin cancer rates, more severe weather patterns, and massive disruptions to ecosystems worldwide. It's unfair that while the majority of us are working hard to be eco-friendly, the wealthiest few are allowed to pollute without consequence. Space tourism advocates claim that these trips increase interest in space and support scientific research. But let's be honest, these benefits are exaggerated. Sure, space Tourists can do some experiments in zero gravity, but these same experiments are already being done by professional astronauts. A 2021 study by Harvard University found that over 90% of space tourism trips had no measurable impact on scientific research that wasn't already accessible through traditional space missions. We have already have the data from organizations like NASA, which are funded by public and focus on missions that benefit everyone. In the end, space tourism is mostly exclusive to the rich and contributes little to the greater good of humanity. So, what should we do? We need a plan that makes space exploration sustainable without catering solely to the rich. I have a three-part solution. First, we should ban space tourism that isn't scientifically driven. If we restrict space flights to only scientific and governmental missions, we'll limit the amount of space debris and pollution from unnecessary flights. Missions that actually advance scientific understanding should be the only ones allowed. Second, we need environmental regulations for space companies. This includes setting strict limits on black carbon's emissions with requirements for cleaner fuels and technology to minimize damage to the ozone layer. Just as the EPA regulates emissions on Earth, we need regulations for emissions in the stratosphere and beyond. Universities like Stanford and Berkeley have both conducted studies showing that emissions from space flights could be reduced by up to 40% by investing in cleaner rocket technologies. For example, SpaceX has been testing greener fuel options for their rockets, and private companies should be required to follow these standards across the board. Finally, we should implement a space debris tax on private companies. For each launch, companies would pay into a space debris mitigation fund, which would go towards technologies and projects that clear existing debris from orbit. This fund could also support research into cleaner launch technology, helping make space safer and more sustainable in the long run. Space tourism might sound thrilling, but it's a dangerous trend with real consequences for everyone on Earth. To protect our planet, we need to start taking action now, before it becomes a permanent part of everyday life. Our choices today can mean future generations won't have to deal with a cluttered orbit or an atmosphere damaged by our thrill seeking. So, next time I'm watching Discovery Channel or scrolling through the space section on BBC, I want to feel genuinely excited about what we're achieving in space, not disappointed by how we're turning the universe into a playground for the ultra wealthy. It's time we stop treating space like a luxury destination and start treating it like the shared resource it is, one that we all have a duty to protect. Thank you.